I miss being able to wake up and walk out of my room whenever I want.
Showering when I want to. Having a real toothbrush. Wearing my own clothes.
I miss not having to ask for movement. Wearing cool shoes. Sitting in my favorite chair. Being excited about the day.
I miss my family. The big family gatherings, my mom helping me with my hair, or chilling on a boring Tuesday night watching a movie.
I miss driving around with my friends, listening to music, eating the food I love, attending my normal school, playing a quick game with my friends after.
Most of all, I miss being there to support my family and friends.
I hope when I get out, I'll get a second chance to be the person I know I can be.
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 Good evening, everyone. As the Executive Director of Stand for Children Washington, an organization that serves as a unique catalyst for educational success and social progress, I am honored to welcome you to Changing Our Future. This important conversation is not just about policy, but about people, systems, and the urgent need for change. Before we dive in further, I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors and partners who made this event possible, enabling us to keep the program free of charge and open to all. Thank you to our financial sponsors, John and Bobby Bridge, the Rakes Foundation, SDMC Consulting, and the Seattle Public Library. Thank you as well to our in-kind sponsor, the Seattle Times, and thank you to our bookseller partner, the Elliott Day Book Company. A portion of book sales tonight will benefit Stand as well as Town Hall Seattle, so I encourage you to pick up a copy of Words of the State before you head out. The author, Claudia Rowe, will be available to sign after the program. I also want to thank our nonprofit co-sponsors. This work does not happen alone, and we are grateful to work in collaboration and partnership with such an incredible group of organizations, providing everything from direct service to systemic advocacy change and everything in between. Let's give them a hand. There is a table by the entrance where many of them have left materials, so please stop by and check out a little bit more about them. Thank you as well to our lawmakers in attendance, and if you're an elected official, please stand up and be recognized for your public service. Got a couple of you in here. Yes, thank you, Rep. Goodman, for being here. And finally, I'd like to thank all of our volunteers tonight, and particularly our incredible staff team at Stand for Children, Mackenzie Nell, Carolina Fuentes, and Milay Tang. Thank you so much for all of your work tonight. We opened with a video produced by Share Screenwriting Program, featuring the words of young people at Echo Glen Juvenile State Prison, spoken by their peers at Renton and Issaquah High Schools. As you listen to our speakers tonight, I invite you to remember that we're talking about young people, children, who should be worrying about an algebra test or trying out for band or the soccer team, but instead are behind bars. Tonight will be an opportunity to break down the barrier between those kids and our kids, and to understand our collective responsibility to demand better for our kids and our communities. Think about the children and youth that you know, what they want and need, and what you are prepared to do to make sure that they get those needs met. This requires confronting the ways that our education system, our foster care system, and our justice system fall short, often as the result of the legacies of racism and colonialism upon which they are founded. It is no secret that these systems are deeply intertwined, yet our policy solutions so often try to make change in a vacuum. The results are predictable. We see huge disparities in educational success for students by race, income, foster care status, and homelessness status, not because these students are less capable, but because they have been less supported. Only 40% of foster and homeless students are passing all their classes in 9th grade, a key indicator for high school graduation. Black, Latino, and Native American students have graduation rates well below the state average. Meanwhile, in state prisons, state juvenile prisons, 1 in 3 young people are Black and 1 in 5 are Latino. Once youth touch the justice system, their chances of graduating grow vanishingly small. Fewer than 1 in 5 graduate high school. We are pushing young people out of educational pathways and into carceral pathways. This is unacceptable. It is also systemic, meaning it's happening despite the hard work and dedication of many talented, caring people working in these systems. Many of you here tonight are those talented, caring people. Young people need us to not be overwhelmed, but to roll up our sleeves and commit to a better future for them and for all of us. Luckily, there are bright spots we can build on, and our partners and panelists are at the forefront of transformative, community-rooted solutions. Despite what you hear on the news, last year there were 2,500 fewer youth arrests than in 2019. That's part of a long downward trend in youth crime for the last 2 decades. Every court in the state has embraced opportunities to divert youth away from court and into community. In the education space, the 9th Grade Success Initiative has raised the rate of students on track to graduate 13 percentage points in 4 years across nearly 70 high schools. Change is possible. Tonight, you'll hear more about these possibilities from our panelists and why our approach must be holistic, not siloed. You'll hear from Claudia Rowe, whose recent book, Wards of the State, was just longlisted for the National Book Award. Wards is also the impetus for this conversation. Claudia's research uncovered the not-so-hidden fact that foster youth are overwhelmingly overrepresented in our jails and prisons. You'll hear from Arthur Longworth, who is featured in Claudia's book and went from experiencing the foster care to prison pipeline to co-authoring recommendations to end it, and today serves as a policy manager at Team Child. You'll hear from Dr. Ben Danielson, a pediatrician who has become a leader in reimagining youth incarceration from a health perspective. And you'll hear from Kaaren Andrews and Henterson Carlisle, 2 longtime educators who have taken their commitment to students and translated that to approaches that build inclusion and belonging and success from the second a student walks through a school's doors. I'm delighted to announce a surprise special guest. Sixto Cancel is a national leader working at the intersection of child welfare, technology, and policy, and is featured in Claudia's book. And he'll join her on stage shortly. I hope as you walked in, you saw the beautiful artwork from youth artist Jada Lim. Yes. If you haven't, check it out on your way out. I hope seeing her art reminded you of the boundless potential of each child in our community. I hope you'll listen to the voices of young people shared in the videos from tonight and reflect on the messages they are sharing. Tonight is intended to be complementary to powerful youth organizing and advocacy. Examples of this abound: the Mockingbird Society's Youth Leadership Summit and their annual advocacy agenda, testimony in Olympia from young people involved with Justice for Girls, Team Child, Choose 180, and so many other organizations. Youth incarcerated at Green Hill have even put forward a bill for 3 years in a row that has yet to be passed into law. Youth continue to tell us what they want and need loudly and clearly. So tonight it's time for the adults to commit to action. Again, welcome to Changing Our Future. We're so thrilled that you're here, and I'm honored to pass the mic to Claudia Rowe, who will set the stage prior to the panel.
Thanks, Liz, and thanks to all of you for coming out tonight. I'm really honored and very moved by this. It's an important discussion that we're here to hold, and it's a discussion about young people in Washington State and really across our country. We're going to be talking tonight about some things I discovered while researching my new book, Wards of the State. The subtitle of it is The Long Shadow of American Foster Care. We're going to talk about what that means. We're also going to talk about some questions that were prompted by discoveries I made, and I will, while we're researching the book, and I should say, as Liz noted, none of these things are new. They speak to wrongs that we have been accepting for years, for decades, actually for the better part of a century. So really, it is time to get serious about some different answers. The idea for this book came to me while I was sitting in the King County Courthouse. It was 2019, and I was watching a teenage girl being sentenced for murder. She had spent about 6 years in foster care, and her case reminded me of research I had heard about a decade before, in the early 2000s. It pointed out what sounded to me at the time like wildly high incarceration rates for former foster kids. Data from the Midwest said that 59% of kids who age out of the system at 18 will have been incarcerated by the time they're 26. 59%. It just astounded me. And then I happened upon an economist at MIT. His name is Joseph Doyle. And he had determined that kids in foster care are three times more likely to experience incarceration than other children growing up in similarly struggling families who are not removed. Conservative estimates say that 20 to 25% of people in our state prisons are alumni of the foster care system. 25%. And that doesn't even include county jails, juvenile detention halls. There's 25% in our state prisons from the foster care system. As well, about 30% of the young adult homeless are also former foster youth. So seeing all these numbers, and it starts to occur to me, it's pretty doubtful that all these thousands of kids were somehow destined for these ends from birth. It's impossible. So I began to wonder if there wasn't something about the child welfare system that was encouraging or possibly even creating these outcomes. So doing research for this book, as we said, you will meet tonight some of the people I met while doing the research. One of them is Sixto Cancel, who we mentioned. He's a former foster child from Bridgeport, Connecticut, who has grown into a national activist on child welfare reform and has worked with 3 presidential administrations. I don't think he's even 35 yet. Maybe he's 35. Another is Art Longworth, who received a life sentence for a crime he committed shortly after being ejected from the Washington State foster care system in 1981. As you know, Art is here tonight. You'll have to read the book to find out how that happened. I'm sketching these stories for you to explain what I mean by that subtitle, The Long Shadow of American Foster Care. It's the sense that our child welfare system, well-intended though it may be, hangs over the lives of its clients long after they leave. That it is, in fact, damaging young people, and by extension, the larger social fabric that envelops all of us. That instead of saving kids, which is the idea, it is actually creating problems that hobble not only the lives of those who have grown up in the system, but all of us as citizens of this country. And if there is a central point I want to make tonight, it's the interconnectedness of these systems, the child welfare, juvenile justice, and education systems. To me, that suggests that effective solutions to the problems we're talking about are also interconnected. There are, I should say, foster care abolitionists who insist that the system cannot be reformed, that it is rotten at the core from its conception to the present day. So I'm going to just quickly sketch a little bit of that history. And the first thing to understand is that for a very long time, we have seen kids in need as kids to fear. The first person ever executed in the brand new state of Wyoming in 1892 was, in fact, a runaway from foster care named Charlie Miller. Charlie, who was 17 when he was hanged, had been born in New York City in 1874, right around the time that a young Yale-educated minister came up with an idea for dealing with the hordes of homeless children who were thronging city streets. These were the sons and daughters of new immigrants from Europe. They were indigent Jews and Italians and Irish, mainly. And they did not have enough money to feed their kids. There are some estimates that say 30,000 children were sleeping on the streets of New York City. They were sleeping in vestibules and alleyways, banding together in gangs, pickpocketing for survival. They are idle and vicious, destined to a life of misery, shame, crime, and ultimately a felon's doom. That was the New York City chief of police at the time. You've maybe heard this term, orphan trains. It refers to the grand plan conceived by that minister, that Yale-educated minister. His name is Charles Loring Brace, and he's often credited as the father of foster care. And his idea was this: he would gather up all those kids on the street, pack them onto trains, and send them out to the growing West. Here, right? And they would work on farms and homesteads, earning their keep, so to speak. In return, they would be clothed and housed and fed. This arrangement was seen as like brilliant. It was a huge win for everyone, huge success. It lasted 75 years. And by then, 150,000 kids had been scooped up from city streets on the East Coast and transplanted into homes of strangers across the country. Charlie Miller, that 17-year-old, was one of these kids. And many of them, by the way, were not actually orphans. That term comes from a 1978 TV movie, like on ABC or something. The movement, this orphan train movement, died out after World War I, when the government began providing financial aid to widows who had children to care for. But the feds let each state dictate its own criteria for who would be eligible for these widows' stipends. In the South, many states passed laws excluding women who worked in certain professions. For example, as housekeepers, a job held almost entirely by Black women. Southern states also passed laws denying aid to women who had live-in boyfriends. And then, in 1961, Arthur Fleming, who was the head of the US Department of Human Services, observed that it made no sense, in fact, might be morally wrong, to deem a home substandard, not give the woman of the house a stipend because you don't like the way she's living, but then to leave the kids there. So then this is what prompted the vast removal of children from the homes of Black moms in particular. In 1 year, foster care exploded by 60%, going from 163,000 to 272,000 kids in 1 year. And that is the birth of the modern-day child welfare system, which disproportionately targets children of color and almost exclusively children of the poor. Those numbers really look quaint today. There are now almost 400,000 kids in the US foster care system. So is it broken? There's no question that it is failing many, many children. There is no question we can do better. Maybe that means reconceiving foster care to be a system geared not toward housing kids, but toward healing them. That is entirely different from what we have today. Maybe it means measuring outcomes in a different way, like high school diploma, college degree. Definitely it means understanding that foster care does not exist as a vacuum unto itself, that it touches many other systems. And that is what we're going to address tonight. So I think it's time for some questions. Sixto, where are you? Can you come up here? There you are, yay. Okay, so it's pretty great that Sixto is here. He is actually in Seattle for other work, but
the love is the same. Hold on.
Love is the same. All right. So Sixto, Wards of the State traces your story from early childhood to the point where you founded the nonprofit Think of Us, which is geared toward older foster youth who are on the verge of aging out of the system and their needs. It's also geared to surfacing ideas to reform foster care. But Sixto, as I mentioned, has worked with 3 presidential administrations, the Obama, Trump, and Biden. So that's pretty good. So my first question is, that's a pretty incredible trajectory. So can you help people understand how your experience is relevant to the experience of foster kids who are nowhere near where you are right now?
Yeah, well, thank you so much. And, thank you for, to Stand for Children. Thank you, Claudia, for really the amazing work that you've done over the years and witnessing you really bring this from an idea to this moment. It's such an honor to even just witness the power of someone who has dug that deep into our issues. I think one of the most similar things of my experience to every young person who's in care is that there's a moment that you realize that a separation makes you question, do you still belong? And when I think about what's actually the child welfare system is structured to do, it's been to investigate. It's been to think about, do you qualify to be removed or not, right? And then it has this moment where you're either being court supervised, not getting the support, or you are in the foster care system. And so the one common thread is that everyone who's been in foster care can say they had that day, whether they remember it or they don't. And it's interesting that you say that you were giving some history, because we talked about Charles Loring Brace, but I'll go back to King Henry VIII, and he had a problem. He had relationship issues. And he wanted to get a divorce. And he wanted his way, and he couldn't get a divorce. So then he decided he would get rid of the people who didn't allow the divorce, which was the church. And when that happened, that dissolved the monasteries, which were responsible for actually serving the poor and being that individualized support that existed. So fast forward from 1530 all the way to 1601, you have chaos. Right. And now Queen Elizabeth I finds herself saying she actually has to respond to, the government has to respond to create a system that's going to address this. And children, right? And I mention this moment because 1601 is the initial welfare system that says there's deserving people and undeserving people. And the philosophy of who deserves to get helped went from England all the way to the first colonies of the United States of America. And our case management is structured that way. And so is our child welfare systems. So when I think about what is that most common experience, at one point there was an evaluation of whether this person who had a child deserved help or not. Then it was, instead of trying to solve the problem, right, in many cases, it was an evaluation that, brought you in or not. But we're on the cusp of some reforms that starts to shift that type of thinking.
So talk to us about some of the most promising reforms that you're seeing right now. And if you can, where Washington State lands in that picture.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most interesting moments to be alive for system reform around children. When I think about the child welfare system, there are 7 million children who are involved in a child abuse report a year. There are 74 million children in this country. It's about 10% every single year, right? 33% of all children by their 18th birthday will experience a knock on that door of a social worker. For Black families, it's 53%. Now, a lot of folks have organized for a long time to address that. And I am so curious about what if that moment actually became a moment where resources were deployed and not just an investigation. And in 2018, this law, Family First, passed, and it's an attempt to do that. It's an attempt to be able to say, if you're having problems with substance abuse, mental health, or you need some parenting support, let's deploy it. We got to figure out how to implement that well, right? But so the opportunity to get support on the front end with the program, that's starting to bubble up. Then there's the opportunity to stay with family. There was an epiphany that happened where people were like, well, if we need people to take care of children, let's ask auntie or grandma or their siblings, right? And so now being able to do that in an easier way where it can be, where the federal government can give some money to states to make that happen, that's 2023. And the most interesting for me was during President Obama's time, where there was this MOU, long story short, you don't need to know bureaucracy, but this thing went out from the feds to the states and said, guess what? You have a new mandate. You're also responsible for the healing and the development of a child, not just the safety. These are all the raw ingredients to actually be able to say, how is it that you can ensure that a child is in a system where your well-being, your mental health, all of that is being addressed? This idea that support families to actually support families. And what's interesting about what we call kinship, right, being placed with a child, is that I'm starting to realize, or starting to have this theory, that we can start to solve multiple problems, right? Foster care, let's solve a child being able to heal, develop, and thrive by engaging a family member and making sure that that family member is equipped to raise that child. It was interesting because I thought about elderly. They get to choose a family member, and the state and government resources that family member to take care of them. Never thought about that as kinship, right? And so there's other problems, as we saw, that I'm curious about. What does it look like when a family member is resourced by government to show up at a school and be your educational advocate, or to show up in court and having the ability to take that time and be able to do that? So I think there's something about that's bubbling up that's around how is it that we might actually solve hard problems through other family members.
That is surprising, really, that it's kind of a leading edge. You'd think this should have been going on decades ago, but it is the leading edge, and it is showing some promise. Thank you so much for your work on that.
Thank you.
I never want to be bad. I only want to do my best. I was taught otherwise, so my best is low.
I wish people knew that I'm a good kid no matter the circumstances I'm in right now.
Family is everything to me. I'm normal. I wish people knew pleasing my mom means a lot to me. My family means the world to me. Time is money.
I'm an artist. I love my family.
I wish people knew felons got feelings too. Most of us just want to be heard, but never are.
Graffiti is art, not a crime.
The crime I committed in the past doesn't shape who I am today. They looked at what I did instead of who I am. I'm just a kid that did wrong, and now I'm being treated as an adult when I'm not even the legal age to drive. Kids make mistakes.
I deserve respect and support.
I wish people knew I love art and games.
Felons are people too.
I'm a cold-hearted lover. My love may not look like yours, but it's real.
I like to joke and mess around even when I'm not trying to.
I wish people knew that I don't take disrespect lightly. I do what I gotta do to get my money under any circumstances. Always been the type to do my own shit. Play your cards the way you want them to be dealt.
Just because we are in rehab doesn't mean we are not human.
I'm a hooper and a scholar.
I wish people knew I am educated, and I wish they understood that my environment molded me into who I am and influenced a lot of my decisions.
My loved ones are everything to me.
I'm nicer than I look. Honest.
Mistakes are only mistakes if you don't learn from them.
My time is valuable.
Okay. So the first question is for Art. So, Art, you probably remember a couple weeks ago we went to Echo Glen. We talked to some young people there, and I told them about this panel. And I said, okay, you guys, if, you know, it's going to be 200 people listening to you, what do you want to ask the panel? What do you want people here to hear, and what do you want the panelists to answer? And one young man, do you remember, he said, why are some people seen as being more valuable, more important than others? So I think you might have a really interesting answer to this question. You've traveled many roads to get to this night: foster care, incarceration, an unusual array of educational experiences. And so based on what you've seen, I would love if you could speak to that question. Why do you think some people are seen as less valuable than others?
No, I've been thinking a lot about that since we met with those young people, and the incredible thoughtfulness of the questions. And that one young man in particular who, was charged and sentenced as an adult for a crime he committed when he was a juvenile. And when he was asking us why or the question he wanted to pose to the panel, I think, of why are some people regarded more valuable than others, he pointed out a particular case he saw in the news. So I think we just have to look at the lens he was looking through, which I think he sees as the preponderance of the evidence, right? So the case he was referring to in the news was of a white Stanford student, who was facing 14 years for a very serious sexual assault. And a judge gave him 6 months in jail instead because the judge was worried about the severe impact this sentence would have on this 19-year-old's future. He brought up those words particularly, so I had to go and look at that case.
Yes.
And he was dead on. But he also brought up cases of people around him and the difference of the way juveniles who are facing crimes are treated when impassioned parents show up versus when there's no one in the courtroom. And he was struck by those words about the severe impact prison would have on that young person, what the judge felt, right? He was blown away by those words because he'd never heard them.
Right.
And so he was looking at that lens. But also, after being convicted, we have to realize we handed him over to an institution that's populated a vast majority of youth that are just like him, youth of color, right? In a place like Green Hill, it's 70 to 75%. That's a big statement on who's valuable and who's not. And I think, finally, what kept, we were in the room for several hours talking to these young people, and there was incredible dispiritment about the lack of education. They were absolutely hungry for it. And I think we tell a young person a lot about what we think their worth is by the school we put them in or the education we afford them.
Absolutely.
And that just wasn't there for them, especially for the young women. And I really credit the young men for sticking up, because they say, if we got it bad here, we literally got nothing. But these young ladies, they really have it bad. Yeah.
There's also a point you've made to me in the past about the particular disadvantage that kids in foster care experience when they brush up against the criminal justice system. For instance, as Art just alluded to, if your biological family shows up in court and they are there to say, hey, we'll take the kid home, we'll oversee, we'll provide supervision, a judge might be a lot more amenable to allowing like an electronic bracelet so that the kid can go to his regular school and just come home and be home, because they have a sort of traditional family to go home to that is going to supervise them. For a kid in foster care, no. They're at an automatic disadvantage in the legal system because there is no parent who's going to supervise them. Foster parents are not, that's not their job, to be monitoring a kid on an electronic bracelet. So I often think about that. Others, anybody else about what makes a child sort of less valuable than another?
I think if you look back to the history of this land, that we've always, folks have always looked at certain people as less than, going all the way back before slavery. And so those same perspectives, mindsets are still prevalent today. They're still prevalent in the system with the folks who are manning the system. And so I think it it's just par for the course in a sense that some people feel that they are not valued or respected ever, and that they know there's some kids that know they're going to get the short end of the stick when they go in. And that's sad in a sense, but history shows that that's been the mindset for some.
100%. I mean, it's not lost on me that even the language of the 13th Amendment is a whole sentence. I won't say it, I don't know it word for word, but it says something like abolishing slavery except for the case of incarceration. So this direct link that is the continuation of a chattel state is really clear in our Constitution. And I would just also say, can we just pause and reflect the brilliance of young people in these spaces, just their analytic skill in understanding with depth and accuracy what is going on. The statement that they can make from that view just tells us we need to listen more and more to those voices.
I want to continue a little more with you, Dr. Ben Danielson. Your perspectives on young people, I know, have been developed through your many years of work in multiple systems, particularly healthcare and behavioral sciences. But you're now focused on ending youth incarceration. So are there specific policies or laws that you think could stem youth crime before it occurs or could markedly cut recidivism?
I had an interesting day and I want to answer this right. So I'm going to be less of an ranter and just read some of the things I was thinking about.
You can rant, go rant.
So the first thing I thought about with a question like this is sometimes it's interesting to ask why a question is asked. In this circle, I don't know that I need to say this. In other circles, it would be really important to say that that question could be predicated on the idea that we don't have good solutions, that we don't have good ideas out there. And that just ain't right. That is not true. First, there's all of these alternative approaches to incarcerations, all of these examples of diversion programs that have been proven to get better outcomes almost every single time. 50% better, 75% better, 85% better. These improvements in reducing recidivism, the chance of going back into prison, replete with evidence. There is no lack of evidence that better approaches and that those approaches have better outcomes and that those outcomes are cheaper than what we do in our current state. Programs like community-based mentoring programs and skills development programs, things that you all do every single day to show up for young people, to create culturally relevant spaces where people see people who look like them and provide the kinds of programs that help them be seen. Programs that have proven themselves in New York City, in Rhode Island, in Alabama, in Texas, in California, and yes, in Washington State, with all of the wonderful Mockingbird programs and the Choose 180s. They're proven to be beneficial and to be effective. They prove that they work better than our current system. So we don't lack ideas. We have visible proof of cost-effective solutions, and it leads you to the conclusion that you have to start contesting and sitting with, and each of us has to sit with this. If it's not about money, if it's not about evidence, if it's not about proof of practice, then it can only be about a lack of will, a lack of shared community and societal will. And it's a will that comes from all of this other stuff, these false narratives and these inaccurate tropes about fear tactics that are thrown around us. Another point, you got me going, so I'm just...
Go.
We've seen that these alternatives to incarceration work great, and I would argue that they would also work great before any trouble happens in a young person's life. Why do we put good programs behind a firewall that says you must be convicted of a crime before you're eligible for them? Now we're talking... we're talking not only about reducing recidivism, but actually getting into this space of prevention and really getting out of these cycles of arrests, prosecutions, and punishments, and the stickiness of this system that especially seeks out Black and brown and poor people. Moreover, There are more things that we can do that we know has the power to reduce incarceration. One example is this whole example of reducing out-of-home placements in the foster care system. And you started to say it, Washington State went from what, in 2018, over 9,000 foster placement to 2023, less than, or around 4,000.
Now we're in the fours.
Yeah. And that is an enormous change. And that point that you made, that aging out of the foster care system has its own magnetic predilection for incarceration. And on the other side of it, the lack of opportunity in the educational system is just powerful, powerful evidence that we have things we could do that could change the system.
I'm just going to interject. I failed to mention that about half of foster care kids in this country leave high school without a diploma. They drop out. So that's one of the reasons, you're 18, you don't even have a high school diploma. What do we think is going to happen from that?
Another point. We have this really catastrophic intertwining relationship between youth who are unsafely housed and the carceral system. And that happens back and forth, where youth move in and out of being homeless and then being behind bars. The work that we do to reduce youth homelessness has a direct impact on the chances of being incarcerated. We have all of these things that can really work, all of these things that we could be applying upstream, and I mean way upstream. Supports like basic universal health care and basic universal income and direct cash transfer programs. They've proven themselves that they work really well. Pair that with educational programs that meet the strengths of foster youth and mental health services that are good fits, and you'll start to really get that prevention cooking. All these things are working and can be expanded. One challenge for me is that they still tend to wait until a lot of harm occurs in people's lives before we start offering them. I'll share that at AHSHAY. One thing we're trying to do is lend some focus to way, way upstream. We ask these questions like, what would it look like to be in a community that would never even think about incarcerating a youth or allowing a youth to be homeless, where that idea would just be rejected. And the people, the intergenerational folks who are working in that space have taught me a whole lot of really interesting things. We're talking about this idea about belonging. They talk about solutions that are based in belonging. Not just the feeling of belonging, which is absolutely important, but I mean like tangible, manifesting, like policy and programs that actually show belonging. Belonging in the built space, the third spaces that young people exist in. Belonging in the relationships, the intergenerational relationships of mentoring and support. Belonging in the skills building, learning and educational opportunities. Belonging in the ways in which people walk into spaces and their identity is celebrated, not denigrated. Belonging built into work. And then the second thing that this group of people has been teaching me in my community has been that it's not just about a monolithic approach to belonging. Any one single program will not work. You could have the best idea, the best singular idea, and you fall up against that adage that complex problems do not bend to singular solutions. And so what they talk about is a constellation of belonging programs working together. When you integrate all of those programs, which is your point, these are not issues of isolations, so their solutions are not solutions of isolation. They're integrated belonging solutions. I am starting to really ramble too far, but I will just say, we really need to, we find all of these answers. They are there. They're especially there in our young people, in our youth and young adults. And the more we listen to them, the more successful we are going to be in finding really good solutions. And I just think, if we understand the ways in which we are intentionally harming young people, the ways in which racism has been built into these systems, if we really hold our own selves up to the mirror of that, and we start to think differently, I can't imagine that we would continue the practices that we are today.
So about belonging. So Kaaren is also in the book, I should say. She makes a brief appearance there. Kaaren is a longtime educator, has been a principal in Seattle Public Schools, left Seattle Public Schools, but really, really knows what happens in schools, all kinds of schools. So Kaaren, you know, I think that I worry that when we talk about this stuff and I say these huge numbers and it sounds impossible and it's quite depressing if you kind of fixate on that stuff. But Kaaren doesn't ever seem to get depressed into paralysis. And I wonder if you can talk about the way belonging manifests in a school and how just regular folks, just, you know, parents, teachers, people in a school, a community around the school can work on this thing that Ben was talking about belonging with kids.
I can lend a few thoughts. I definitely don't have the answer, but I think that tying together what everybody has already said, I think the first thing that we have to do as a whole community is to really deeply reflect on why it is that we view some kids differently than other kids, than our kids. And if we can do that and realize and deeply come to a place where we say, this kid who is being tried for something, or this kid who is in foster care or who's on the corner and struggling downtown, they're the same value, the same as my child. And if we do that, that shifts the way that kids feel. I mean, because they feel that. That's what creates connection, right? And I think for me, I call myself a recovering principal because I was a principal for 20 years and 17 in Seattle. And I think when I went to Madrona K-8 and was principal there, I was there for 6 years, and it was at that time, 90+% African American community, and I was incredibly honored to be given the opportunity to be in that community. And I learned almost every important lesson that stays with me from being there. And I will say that, first of all, I'd been in other schools as principal, and kids were not, CPS did not show up in those schools in the same way. They did not, the police did not show up. They did not come and expect to have access to the children, to the families, to do whatever it is that they intended to do. They didn't remove children from families as quickly, or they just didn't. And I found myself, and I know there are several people in this room who were in this school with me. One is sitting 2 seats down. And we would find ourselves often 9, 10, 11 p.m. waiting with the police for someone to come and tell us what was going to happen with a child, with a 5-year-old, with a 14-year-old, because it was, 5 to age 15. And we would be there, like, finding snacks, ordering food, trying to make it light, and it wasn't light. Like Sixto said, like that moment, that was the day for so many kids, right? And we witnessed it, and it was horrible. And then kids would be taken, and then they wouldn't come back to school. And school, this was a community of people who loved each other, truly, and they would be taken. And then maybe they would come back a week or 2 weeks later, maybe, but they were different. Something had shifted, and we would try really, really hard to bring them back in. But now their parents didn't trust us, regardless of whether, and I don't blame them, regardless of whether we were the ones who made the call, they didn't know. And so we would be really working hard to try to do that. So one thing that I decided I would try to do was to figure out, because all these kids, there weren't enough families or adults that had foster care licenses for short-term care in Seattle. So all these kids would be taken. The reason they didn't come, even with all the laws that say they get transportation, kids in foster care, they'd be out in Federal Way, further, Puyallup, all the way out there, and they couldn't get things set up. So kids didn't come back. So I thought, okay, one thing we can do is I can get foster certified, and I can take kids home to my house for these short-term stays, and I can help in this way, right? So I embarked on the journey of getting my foster license. I was single, and it was amazing what I learned in that. First, one, it's hard and easy at the same time. And one, it seemed like either people were doing it for money or they were doing it because they wanted a baby. They wanted to adopt a baby. Meanwhile, like, neither of those are the likely outcome of what is happening here, right? So I learned quickly. I got my license. I started having kids in my own community come stay for short periods of time. It brought me actually significantly closer to families, because when they were going through their lowest moment, I never wanted their kids. You know, it wasn't like this, Ms. Andrews is going to keep our kids. It was like, I'm just stepping in for a moment, you know, but then you learn all these struggles, and you learn, like, everybody's having a hard time. Like, people just need, like, if instead of paying $1,000 a day, I think, Art, you told me that, right? To house someone at Echo Glen or at Green Hill, what if we gave $1,000 a week, $1,000 a day? I'll just go with the whole thing, $1,000 a day to really take care of kids. We're gonna have entirely different outcomes. But in this learning that I had, it was like, it became clear to me, like there's so much of a need to step in and be in this space, like, and to be close to and be willing to put yourself in a really vulnerable position, and also to not be afraid to be vulnerable with someone else who's going through that. So I learned a lot from that. And so I decided and realized that we needed more. Like, we needed more people who lived in the Madrona Central area that were part of the community. So I got about 30 people to come and get their foster licenses together, and we set it up on... that's something I'm proud of. It's true. It wasn't perfect, though, guys. It was not perfect. There are challenges, because I think part of the reason that it's hard is that you have to be unconditional love, like your own kid. How many people are parents in here, right? Like, your own kid, they're not their best self every day, are they? And they're... Yeah, and neither are parents. I mean, I think what's so hard is, like, we want to, as a society, think of everyone as, like, you're either the hero or the villain. And on most days, I'm not a hero or a villain, but on some days I am, both, you know, and either. But mostly, like, we're somewhere in the middle. We're just like normal people, right? Trying our best. But when your kids get taken away from you and put into foster care, you're the villain. And it's hard to come back from that. And your worst day, your worst thing that you've done becomes public knowledge to everyone, and it's hard to come back from it. So that's all to say that I think that by viewing children differently, by viewing parents' worst day and not thinking of them as bad people, like, I think of myself as a parent of the two most amazing kids that I know, and I know a lot of amazing kids, but I think of myself as very average as a parent, because, like, I have, and that's not because I don't have really good days, but I also have really bad days. So that's where the average comes in, you know? And I think, like, not everybody sees my bad days, right? Like, those aren't public. And they are public for a lot of people. So I guess, like, having grace, giving people grace, stepping into the gap, viewing kids differently, loving them unconditionally, like, thinking of, like, how can I do that? And sometimes, like, you don't have the time to lean in and be a foster parent. It led to a beautiful thing for me. I ended up adopting 2 kids out of foster care. And I say that, it's emotional for me because, well, for obvious reasons, they were little and one just started college, one just started high school, all of that. But like, there are all these other kids who've been at my house and who have been at Christmas with some of you guys. The lights are in my eyes, so I can't see Kate and Penny and over there. But you guys have had, you know, holidays with me and my family and seen that. But I fell short for them. I fell short for a lot of children, and I did, and it's broken my heart. I was really upset last week on a call with these guys in preparation for this, because I have, and I'm still in touch with a lot of these young people, and I didn't give them that unconditional love that they needed. And I needed help. I needed community support to do that, right? And they deserve better. So it's the little things. If you don't have the time, maybe you have the money and you can help support, support programs that support kids in foster cares and families who are willing to step into that gap. If you don't have the money and you have the time, maybe you can do the other. If you don't have either right now, then you can look at kids and love them and open your hearts to them. I mean, I guess I'll stop there.
I think that I think what you really did was create a community of belonging within your school with all these people who you got to come together and get certified and create like this net around the kids who were in the school who were being removed. It's really I haven't heard that story from really anyone else. It really sticks in my mind. And Henterson, for you. Just by virtue of we have different systems. We have the education system, we have the child welfare system, we have the juvenile justice system, and we tend, perhaps understandably, to go, oh, there's a problem there, and let's drill in on this system, and we're going to fix education. Never. Or we're going to fix, whatever. But we focus very narrowly, and I'm wondering, since I know that your work as both an educator has brought you into juvenile detention, so you're seeing the same kids from different angles, and I'm wondering how you think about this approach to problem solving. What works best?
Well, I think when I first think about that, I think, and Liz spoke to it, that these different systems are working in silos. And they feel that the problem in the justice system is the problem in the justice system. The problem in education is the problem in education. But if you really look deeper, that problem hits in the justice system, it hits in the education system, it hits in the child welfare system. A kid who comes to school struggling may very well have housing insecurity and have an incarcerated parent. So when systems are only trying to solve their problem and not looking at the interconnectedness between all the different systems, they're not really digging down to the root. I mean, when we really want to dig deeper to the root cause, it's got to be around generational poverty. It's going to be around racism. It's going to be around mass incarceration. It's going to be around lack of access and lack of opportunity. Those are the real deeper root causes that affect all the different systems. So until the different systems can really work together, then they're only going to try to solve this problem, this narrow focus problem, out of their own system. Like you said, I work for Stand for Children. I do want to talk a little bit about belonging. In our work with ninth grade success for the Center for High School Success, when a kid comes up, a ninth grader comes up as a student of concern, the number one question we look at is, how's that kid's sense of belonging? Before we can get to any academic, any behavior piece, we need to make sure that this kid feels connected to school, feels that they belong, they're respected, they're valued, they're heard. So that belonging, that community is very important, because we have students who are hyper visible, but walk around feeling invisible. They stick out like a sore thumb, but if you ask that kid feels that no one sees them. They're sitting alone at lunch. They got 2 or 3 friends. They're never called on in class. So that sense of belonging is very important. Also, I see that so on the weekends, because not that I'm busy enough, I go down to 12th and Alder for the last 18 months, and I run groups down there Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I see the same thing in terms of belonging and community. The thing is, they found it in a place that maybe didn't have all the pro-social behaviors that we want. But every kid wants to feel a sense of belonging. They want to feel family, and because we're social creatures. And kids are going to find their group. So whether their group is in school, whether their group is in church, or whether their group is on the corner, they're going to find them. Some of the lack of, when I look at the education system, so when we check in with kids, we are always asking them about their week in school. And the stories that I hear from them down there is really that they feel that they're not valued. They feel that the teachers don't care. They're just here for a check. Some of those very sharp kids down there know that they're not getting what they need to be successful once they move away from either the detention back into community or even as they move up to Green Hill or Echo Glen. So again, a lack of the systems working together to really solve the problems, to really build our students up, build our young people up, because they are coming back to community. And they're coming back, whether we like it or not, they're coming back either with skills to make better pro-social decisions, or they're gonna come out better criminals. So it's really indicative that all the systems need to work together. I think we also need to really value the community-based organizations. I think we're not leaning on them. They're always being cut in terms of funding, but they're another avenue of advocates that can work really specifically in the community. They know what the community needs. They know how to access resources. So that's another leverage point so that to get the systems talking to each other. But until they talk to each other, until they look at the deeper root causes, it's always going to be this effort that I think we don't get the value out of the effort.
So this is for any of you or anyone else. About these systems not talking to each other. In my day job, I'm a journalist. I look at, education, child welfare, juvenile justice systems, sort of as an outside observer. I am wondering if any of you have thoughts about why they seem almost incentivized to not work together. I don't understand, frankly, why it is so hard to get the leaders of these major systems, we'll just say in our state for now, to really work together and conceive answers together and pitch those answers, those collaborative answers, say, to the legislature. Maybe it happens, but I don't understand why it isn't a normal thing. Do any of you have thoughts? You guys?
It's held out as being because of privacy and not being able to share information in protecting the individuals involved, but it does not protect their privacy and it does not solve problems. The most success I've ever seen is in the alternative high schools. In the alternative high schools where we actually were housed in a youth care shelter. We were housed in places that were run by community organizations because it forced us to all talk together and surround the kids. But I know others have bigger ideas on it.
No, I think that's it. I do think funding systems create those silos pretty powerfully, and it's really hard sometimes for us to imagine funding systems that can be different. Related to that, I think we get really caught up in the scarcity mindset in our approach to how we think about resources, so that if I'm supposed to work with you in the schools, whatever resources you're getting somehow is coming away from my resources, and we can't seem to understand the synergy that comes from working together in those things. And apologies if, well, no, I'll just say, the structure tends to work harder to reinforce the structure than to care about the lives people passing through the structure. So all the effort goes into kind of holding those up. But I love when you start talking about spaces that are actually incentivized or even forced to exist together, and then you talk about common values, well-being instead of widgets belonging instead of whatever anti-negative thing you're trying to avoid, I think then you start to see something more possible.
I think that's why they say the system is built to get the results that it's getting.
Right. So that is one point I want to make. Sometimes people say, is foster care broken? Well, exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. Its outcomes are terrible, but it is working as designed. So that's why I have a problem with the word broken is definitely wrong-headed. But I don't know if we can say it's broken. One thing I failed to mention, sorry about that, is that we have this QR code where anybody can sort of ask questions, and maybe some of you were smart enough to figure that out on your own, and yeah?
Not working as we had hoped it would. So if you did try to ask a question, I'm sorry, because you weren't able to, but we're gonna go old school and we will have a microphone and people can ask their questions that way. So I'm glad that everyone had a chance to think about your questions because of the Menti, and we will switch over there in just a second. So if you're ready for that, we can.
I think we're ready. You guys ready for some questions from our patient listeners?
All right.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. Recently, Jimmy Kimmel was suspended from a job and then brought back because the powers that be lost a lot of money. I was wondering if we put that same kind of energy and focus into the way that we put into Jimmy Kimmel, into like other systems, could we really make a change instead of just mute talking points about how we would like a society to be?
So I think you're talking about, again, like a financial incentive or disincentive or a punishment.
Or just an even moral incentive.
A moral incentive. Say more about that. What do you mean?
Well, I think, especially in terms of America, right? Well, we treat children as like their property. We sexualize them, romanticize them, do all these disgusting things, right? You could take somebody like Brooke Shields, like or Michael Jackson, or take your pick, where kids were not seen as kids, and if we're not looking at kids as like human beings, and we're treating them as like something like as a legacy or a property or some other thing, then we're doing an injustice to them before they even get out the gate, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I think we could just sort of address what you're talking about by holding up organizations that sort of like, that don't do that, right? I mean, I think that's what you're talking about, like making an example for, right? Like making a broad example. Is that what you're talking about?
So yeah, I think, does anyone else want to respond to that? We've got a whole bunch more questions, so maybe we'll get a couple more. And
just that our amazing folks in frontline community sectors are getting canceled left and right. And I think there's also a need for us, and I'm sorry if this sounds like talking points, but like we really need to strategize how we build up and support our community leaders, our folks who are doing that work every day. And it seems like we have structures that actually sometimes undermine their longevity, their sustainability, their wellness, their thinking about their own health and everything else like that.
Great. I think we've got a question in the back there.
Thanks for answering all the questions. I feel like throughout the conversation, we have all the wrong measure to support children or young adults in extended foster care or have been incarcerated in the past. I feel like a lot of people being looked down upon just because they don't have a high school diploma or a college degree. But my personal thought that is not the only road to success. And I really benefit from the program. I earned my college degree, and I got like the TV fund to get through school and purchase supplies. But that's the path that worked for me. For a lot of younger people, I think they can really benefit from like trading school or doing something that not necessarily the traditional route, finishing high school or getting to college. So my question is, how could that be account to any of reformation to the current way that we approach this problem to really help people that want to go outside of that traditional trajectory?
Well, I think some of that is with exposure and being exposed to the different careers that are not so much considered those high track careers. In our work down at Juvenile, we actually bring in AR, VR, and do career exploration with students. And we have modules around all the different trades, carpentry, plumbing, construction, automotive. For one, we realize that some of these students are going to be felons. And so trying to be realistic in what their options are going to be when they're leaving the system. And we know that trades are felon-friendly fields. When you really look at how important trades are going to be in 10 years, they're going to be the fastest growing jobs, that careers that we need in this country in terms of all the different building, the manufacturing, all that they're trying to bring back. So really we talk to students, talk to young people about their options. We're really working on their self-worth because it's that blame and shame. They get blamed for something they did or something they didn't do. They were just happened to be born to not the best family. I'm not going to say the wrong family, but not the best family. And they have to carry that shame. So we're about really trying to build self-esteem, trying to build the value that they see in themselves. One thing we talk about is we tell a kid, you're worth your future. We tell every young person that and drill it into their head to get them to be able to know that they have options and they can do things and they can recover from their situation. They can rise above their raisin. Is one thing I say. You know, you're not stuck. It's not. It can be generational, but it doesn't have to be.
But high schools have to change for sure because we're holding kids up to the same high school graduation requirements from the 1800s, and when it was set up just for a very small percentage of our populace. And if it's going to carry forward democracy, which obviously we're a little bit not sure at this point, that we have to change. We have to make it meaningful. We have to show kids, why would you come every day to take these courses that don't seem relevant? So what I see, and I have hope because I have the benefit of being in high schools all across the country all the time, and I see so much just really creative thinking. All of the schools are doing, dual credit in the high school so they can earn, kids can see this actually is meaning something. It's career pathways, career technical education. It's happening earlier and earlier. But if kids come to high school and they don't have a connection, they don't feel that belonging, they will not pass. Does not matter the skills at that point. They will not stick with it. So by setting up systems in high schools where kids are known, then they can access those other programs. Then they can go into trades. They can go into all different sort of alternative forms of post-secondary that lead to, like actual careers.
And what about education in our carceral facilities, such as Echo Glen, Green Hill, or State Prison? I don't know. Art, can you speak to that at all? I mean, this is where you were educated.
Kinda. And no, I want to also go back to the young lady's question about trades. One of the most important or one of the most sought after education programs in male carceral settings is like automotives. it's just, and we're going back to the systems. No, I've seen no bigger clash of state agencies coming together than child welfare and juvenile lockup. You know, our former DCYF director or the initial person worked wonders to try to bring those together, but historically they've been separate. They've been separate, and foster youth going into those systems have been invisible because once they get busted, go to court and get a sentence, they're no longer foster youth, they're delinquents. Those barriers are still there after 10, it's only been 10 years of trying, those barriers are still there. The way that we heard the young people talking at Echo Glen is the clash is the education, even K through 12. They go to school, not enough staff come, not enough security staff come, they're in their cell for 3 days. Screw school, right? The staff think they're acting up in school, they're put in their cell for 3 days and not allowed to go to school. That's not registered as a suspension, as it would be in any other school. Things are happening in there, and I'm conscious that Ton is here. And I don't mean anything bad by that, but we just got to recognize the clash of the agencies is happening there at the cost of the young people's education. And now, you know, personally, one thing I'm worried about that I think really good-hearted people in the system are trying to educate people. This new facility that's opened up at Harbor Heights inside an adult prison, they're attempting to train auto mechanics to young people virtually, like without ever putting a wrench in their hand. Now, I do that work at home. Like, I love it myself. I can't imagine how that's done. There's like virtually. Maybe I'll have to try it, but I worry about that. I worry about that. How can we keep these young people engaged without ever putting a wrench in their hand, without letting them touch an automobile, right? Like, recognizing that the agencies have challenges, but I think we need to get over it, and we've talked all around it, but I think that's where the biggest clash of the agencies at the cost of the young people. And it was said here earlier, these young people are coming home, right? And we were talking about measurements. So just have patience with me for a minute. Like, I'm not a talker, but I just want to, we have this measurement of recidivism. This measurement of recidivism. That's usually what the JR or our incarcerated population is measured by. But we don't measure what we should be, it should be a equation. How many young people are we putting out with diplomas, college degrees, career certification? I guarantee that will change the recidivism rate. I know it for a fact. I've seen it in action. But that's never put together as an equation. When we measure the system, it's what's the recidivism rate. And then it's never back to system accountability. It's, well, those young people were just born to be bad, and they weren't. Take it from me.
Hi, my name is Anthony Harrod. I'm with the Canvas of Hope Foundation, and I was one of those kids that, you know, was 12 years old and given up to the state, taken from my mom, and been in and out of incarceration for 38 years, and I put an end to that. So I know how the system works, and I know what's broken about it, and I know how to fix it because I was in that system my whole life. And so my question to you, Principal, is I admire your story, and I want to thank you for all the love that you gave the community and how you brought people together, because I think it's community. And if you don't have community, it doesn't work. So if you have more people that you can bring together to make this work, then that's how you fix a community. Like, you can't raise a child. It takes a village of people. It takes a community to raise one child, not just a whole city of children. But everybody has to come together in order to make that work. And I want to know how you got everybody to come together to get those licenses, because they had to be brave to put up with these kids, especially from that school, because I went to that school for a couple weeks.
Persistence, I think. No, you're so right, and thank you for sharing a tiny bit of your story. I would love to hear more of it. I think that it's not easy, because I think by putting people together, by sharing, I think by being honest, because we never tell these stories of like what happens after dark in the school. why is the principal still at the school at 10 p.m., you know? And when I started realizing like how extreme it was, and I was in a pretty unique position being white in the role, and I was probably more surprised than others. I felt like I needed to just tell people what was going on and say, what can we do together? What can we do together? And I think it was kind of naive at the start, but then it picked up, I mean, I know it was, but it picked up momentum. And then people said, nobody's gonna do that from DSHS. There's no way they're gonna do. And then they were like, yeah, let's do it. You know, yeah, let's do it. And I think it was a moment of vulnerability. Like I have all these people who say they wanna do it. They're thinking, DSHS thinking they won't really do it. And sure enough, they did. And we did it at the school. And I think just by creating, like you said, it would never work if it were like 3 or 4 people. But it was, you know, a lot more than that. And that's what gave it strength, I think.
But I think, Kaaren, because I was there with you, that you did such a great job of building community and building trust within the community, and in turn empowered families, empowered parents that, hey, you can make a difference too. Think more than just about your kid. Think about that next kid that doesn't have anybody. So I think your testimony and also telling the story, but your persistence, you're modeling it, you're showing that extreme care, I think really galvanized people in that community to want to make a choice to help others. And so, you know, you're always modest, but you really worked hard at it. Again, building community, building trust, and empowering the community.
Yeah. All right, I think we're gonna have one more quick question.
Softball question, I promise.
Okay, great.
Well, thank you all for the conversation tonight, and I think you all have shared just the challenges that are ahead of us. And for all the challenges that we experience, there are also bright spots that we see that never make it to the light of day. And so I think, you know, the way that I see it, the media plays a big part in elevating the bad stories, but hardly ever the good stories. And so, Claudia, this question's for you. Help us elevate the good stories. How do we get the good stories out there so that people aren't driven by the bad stories that then lead to the harsher penalties that lead to more incarceration, and then, you know, the prolongation of this entire system?
Okay. All right. There is a way to do this. And for a little while at the Seattle Times, where I work, we were doing it with education. This is going back now 10 years. We had this thing called Education Lab, and it was focused on what we called solutions journalism. It's not magic solutions, but it's just called that. But what it was, how this does work is you have to, first of all, get editors to buy into it, right? Editors hold the line, they hold the strings. But what we found out was if you write about a problem, but then you show not solutions, but responses to that problem, the story of the response, not just, hey, this is a cool program, that makes readers bored. I'm sorry, it's just the truth. You have to show the problem it's answering and how it precisely this response gets at that problem. You have to get very granular. I think that editors are sort of constitutionally aligned against that. They think it will be boring, but what we found was that it's the opposite. That actually, when you get really micro about this person had this idea, but then they were confronted by this challenge, and you get really specific, that's a narrative. That's a story. People like stories. They don't like being told what to think, but they do like stories. And that is what we found, sort of a warts and all. Like, here were the bumps, here were the parts that were great, here are the parts not so great. Here's the next hoped for version of it somewhere else. If you get that specific, actually readers will follow you. So we were doing it for a while with education coverage. I am increasingly thinking about that kind of approach to child welfare coverage.
Awesome. Thank you all so very much. We are at time. I'm actually wondering if I can impose on the audience for a few more minutes and invite our panelists just to give like one sentence kind of on that theme of bright spots, like what is the hope that you're sort of carrying forward with you, even amidst everything that we've talked about tonight? So you can think for a minute and I'll talk and then you can get at it. How's that? I'll give you time to think about it because I didn't tell you I was going to ask that question. So I hope that everyone here tonight had an opportunity to learn something, to feel challenged, to maybe you agreed with what the panel said, maybe you disagreed, maybe your sort of vantage point has a different perspective. So I think what I heard out of each person here is that we really do have to sort of come together across these systems and really wrestle together with how do we move forward from here. And if we refuse to sort of accept some of the realities that have been shared here tonight, that more than half of kids in foster care are going to touch the carceral system, or that only 1 in 5 kids in our justice system are graduating. If we refuse to accept that reality, sort of what does that refusal then compel us to do, and what action does it compel us to take? So that's what I hope that folks are able to take away from tonight. And with that, I just be curious if in one sentence you can share a bright spot, maybe that, or a hope that's kind of carrying you forward, that you would leave the audience with.
I can.
Okay.
All right. It's the kids. So I did this book, right? And I talked to just dozens of foster kids and former foster kids, and kids who are locked up, kids who used to be locked up. And with every one of them, it's, Dr. Ben said it, it's the brilliance, right? We don't sort of necessarily think that, but the thoughtfulness of the young man at Echo Glen who said, why are some people more valuable than others? That kind of, I would say, a pretty sophisticated understanding of the world he's operating in. This is a teenager. That is there, and there is brilliance in young people, and it is really easy to say, oh, they're traumatized, or they're damaged, or they don't know, or they're so young. But actually, there really is a sort of incisive understanding. If you think about your own self when you were a teenager, you probably kind of realized a kernel of truth that later as an adult you said, oh yeah, I did know that. So that's the hope. There's real brilliance, and there's also real toughness, real resilience in these kids that are in the book and that are in Echo Glen and Green Hill. I talk to them all the time. They have something for us. They have not just value sort of inherently. They actually have like ideas and information. They have something real there, and we should use it.
Yes.
My hope is that every young person gets the care, the support, the nurturing, and the love they deserve just for being a human.
Yes.
Every conversation like this has its elements of weight and difficulty, but there's always so many pieces of hope and light and beauty and possibility. And I so agree with you that I don't know why I ever got paid to be a pediatrician, but to be able to spend time with young people and really know that kind of brilliance is amazing. And just the idea is that sometimes we forget some values that are still so much alive in many young people's minds. And I just want to leave one with you, which is forgiveness and reconciliation. I hear young people talk about that in a way that I would challenge all of us to be thinking about how we would apply that into the way we construct the world around us.
I want to double on that. Forgiveness, reconciliation, and truly being a community. I think like I have a bigger voice because I played basketball. I don't know how that works, but or coached. So yeah, just leaning into our community as a whole together will make it better.
I see hope. A major bright spot for me is we talked about the the siloing of agencies. I hope they can learn by examples. I think an example is here tonight, the way the organizations that advocate for youth stand together, right? That organize this. Treehouse is here. I encourage you to look on your programs, the organizations, and the ones that aren't on the programs that are here. Like I see Friends of Youth at the back of the house. And let it be known, Columbia Legal Services showed up in force. And Legal Women Voters are here. So that is a major bright spot, and hopefully our agencies can learn by the example of the organizations that advocate for youth.
Thank you all again for coming. You will see a QR code that I think actually works this time on the screen. I hope that before you leave tonight, you will join us and be part of the community that is taking action for young people. There are a lot of ways to be involved. You can be an advocate by going down to Olympia or calling your lawmaker or emailing your lawmaker and encouraging them to support legislation that aligns with science and research about what works and what young people are asking for. You can be a voter. Use your power as a voter, as a constituent, to ask your candidates on the campaign trail questions and support candidates that align with your values. And I think coming back to something that Kaaren shared, being a caring and supportive adult in the community, whether that's formally volunteering or just being the person who has snacks and a listening ear for the young people that you know, there's a role for all of us in showing young people that they're loved and cared for. So thank you again for being here tonight. Please join us in taking action and thank our panelists again.